Good morning. So, guys, is it important to the microphone? So, let's start again. For the second day, we prepared, Marcelo and me, part about the categories. So, we have a little trouble with this topic because we know it's a little difficult for someone that never have seen something about categories. So don't you worry if you couldn't understand everything. It's okay? Let's go step by step. I will try give you the most important notions, but it's a little abstract enough this concept. In the second moment, I will present at least the definition of conservative translation. It's a particular case, in some cases, occurred in some functions yesterday. But now we are particularizing the concept of translation for conservative translation. And in the third topic, I will present another moment that is so common, so usual in mathematics, the Galois pairs. Maybe you have listened the expression connection Galois, but the connection is one case of Galois pairs. It's interesting, it's top, and it's surprising that we meet the Galois pairs in a lot of topics of mathematics. We are studying mathematics, oh, a Galois pair here. So you present it and use it in some moment with the translations too. Right? Oh? Well, categories is a very general way to look for mathematical topics. For one never listening about categories, sometimes categories is used to foundations of mathematics like set theory. In some aspect, they are concurrent series. Good papers about this one, Bell, topos and local set series, and the famous book of Goldblatt, Topoi, the categorical analysis of logic. If someone will start, maybe it's good point to start. So, in the following, we are present the conservative translations. Is naturally a subclass of the clear translation that we have presented yesterday. Papers about one a little more recent with another notions of translations too. Of 2019, this paper, Itala, produced with me for a meeting in the Wittgenstein Symposium in Austria. And after we prepared a paper with some innovation, some actual contemporary facts about translations that you met. And the most important for us in conservative translation is one from 2001. So, in the third talk, the translations in Galois pairs. Michael Dunn is one. He was member of our meeting here. The scientific council of this meeting. And unfortunately, he died last year. Well, this interesting book about algebraic methods of philosophical logic. For someone that is interested in algebraic models for logic in general, almost wise in propositional logic. And for connections, this paper of page 4, it's interesting, GR 19, Galois connections. So, let's start. Category is abstract algebra performed in a formal language based exclusively in the concept of objects and arrows, or morphisms. We have used these two expressions, sometimes arrows, sometimes morphisms. And as an intuition about, let's think about the notions about functions. When we have functions from sets, in general, if you never have more set theory course, in middle level, you use functions between subsets of real numbers. In general, we have a function from a set X into a set Y, if, and another function from Y to Z. So, in general, we can perform the composition of functions, G composed with if. And we have another function here from X to Z. We use always the idea of commutative diagram. This is a diagram. This is a diagram. And you say that this diagram commutes when H is exactly the composition of G and if. Besides in set theory, we work with the empty set. If you are not in set theory tradition in general, but just in algebra of sets, in general, we have a set as a domain, and he's a unit this set. So we have a Boolean algebra of sets. We use the union of sets, intersection of sets, inclusion of sets. All these ideas are marked in some way in our theory of categories. We are trying to generalize and put all these ideas in a context of diagrams, arrows, and objects. So this just a motivation for a moment. So the definition now. And the definition of a category has several steps. Let's see. We need a collection of objects. The individuals in category we name objects. And for two objects, we have a collection of the arrows between these two objects. You have named homomorphism between A to B in this direction. So if belong to a arrow or to a homomorphism between A to B, so we write like a function, if from A to B or this way. In this case, like functions, we say that A is domain of if, and B is codomain of if. More. We need a composition operation between morphisms or between arrows. So, if in G are arrows or morphisms, then there exists the composed morphism G circle. And it's important that this graphic, this figure commutes, like we have present in the first moment. Here another point of category theory. This point arrow, in general, in category says there is exactly one. It's a convention for us. There is exactly one. I presented 3 points, but I didn't finish the concept category yet. This composition is an operation between morphism is associative. As in the case of functions, we need that this diagram commutes. And a fourth and last element. For each object x, y, z, a, there is a morphism, the identity function, or it's not always function. The function is a motivation, but it's identity such that the composition with the identity is any function in one side or the other side. It's always the morphism. So identity is a neutral element for this composition. So we need all these elements to have a category. So it's surprising. One category that you see as category in the next moment is the set, the category of the set theory, and maybe this is a general ideas extracted from set theory. But we have a lot of other mathematical concepts that are category. Let's see. The empty category 0. No objects, no arrows. Look, object is a set or a class. We have ours in the context of set theory, and we just have only set, but maybe a class of objects too. In this case, the set of objects is empty, and the set of arrows is empty. There's no problem. This is a case of category. The second example, category with exactly one object. We have the identity, arrow, just one arrow. This is a category too. A category with two objects. So we have identity to 0, identity to 1, and two parallel morphism. They need to be identical. For two objects, we have infinite, possibly infinity morphisms. In this case, we have two, and we, yes?
Every object is just one element, or it could be as a whole?
No, it's one element.
Okay.
Each object is one element. But in this case, we would have other category, putting other morphism, different morphism. Oh?
So one of the arrows should be this. There's two arrows.
In two directions. Yeah, it's possible to put.
So like, is it possible to have two different arrows between the exact same pair with the object? Okay, that's great.
The only thing we need is that the morphism perform a composition, and this composition be associative. Let's see, in this case, with three objects, we have the identity morphism, and as we have a morphism here and another here, we need the composition. If you didn't put this arrow here, so we didn't have a category. Because it's necessary that the morphisms are associative. Is it okay? It's simple object and strange. It's not like we have presented the motivation. But now, the mathematical importance case. So the first one generalize our initial motivation, the sets category. The objects are sets in general. Maybe we have to consider that sets can be class, not exactly sets, but they are not objects of this category. For this category, all the objects are sets, and morphism are functions between sets, and decomposition is the usual. And you know that the composition of functions is associative. We know that the identity function that takes each element in itself is a function and is a neutral element for the composition of functions. So this is a category, maybe the most emblematic. Use this word. It's not better, not just emblematic. But another category, and for one have studied a course of the algebraic structures. In general, we study semigroups or monoids, groups commutative, rings, fields, and other structures. I'm present in the category of groups, but in general, we can put any algebraic structure here. In general, we have a category. For groups, where we can resolve the first equations of first degree. The morphisms are homomorphism between groups, so homomorphism between fields, homomorphism between rings, and so. Another category, top for topological space. In this case, each object is a topological space. In this notation, it said the domain X and the open sets of X. Morphism are continuous functions. And we have another example interesting in set category, in category series. And a little interesting, this one, we can see pre-order, like case of category 2. Well, let's consider an order, P with an order. The category obtained from this set P is like this. The objects are exactly the elements of P. And for two points, two elements of P, we have that the homomorphism between them is a morphism from X to Y if X is less or equal Y. In other ways, we put the empty set. So we can see the general orders as case of categories 2.
Two slides before the last example, 0, 1, 3 is an example of category.
Yes. Marcelo said that the category with 3 elements, 0, 1, and 3, it's a case of order in category. A partial order, maybe. No, in this case, direct.
Question.
A question?
What is MXY?
It's a singleton. There is a type on this slide. It's a singleton formed by just one morphism. That's the name of the morphism.
Okay, so it's just a singleton and it's
Exactly.
just the name of the
It's
movie.
the name of the morphism.
Yes.
Okay.
The notation of.
Okay, so you have all these morphisms that represent the ruler between the objects.
Exactly.
Okay.
Then you have, between two objects, you have two situations. If the domain is less or equal than the codomain, then you put an arrow.
Okay.
If not, you don't have arrows.
Okay, so the you could have ID XX basically, because then that would be showing the identity between the objects.
Yeah,
and that would-
It's important. It's important.
Identity is over that, exactly, because x is less or equal than x. Then you always have the identity.
Great, okay, thank you.
It's important is this order, less or equal, because the identity.
Exactly. Composition is transitivity, the others.
And the last mathematical example, the vectorial spaces. for someone that have done a course of linear algebra, we studied the vectorial space, and the functions between vectorial spaces are linear transformations. For the context of category, the linear transformations are morphisms, and the vectorial space over a particular field K is the collection of the objects this category. So, a concept, translations, some examples, some initials, and another very dense in mathematics. So let's see some particular properties or characteristics of the categories now. Well, we'll use this notation C0 for the objects, and this one, C1, for the morphisms. Okay? Let's see, the union for every A and B belong to the class, the set of, maybe the class of the objects, homomorphisms from A to B. This union composes the collection, the class of morphism in the category C. So, a category is small if these two classes, C0 and C1, are small. What is? They are sets and no proper class. Okay? For someone that has some contact with set theory, we have that for infinite sets, we have someone so big that they are not sets. They are monsters that we have named the class. So, small category work just with sets. And category is locally small if the sets, the group of homomorphism is small or is a set. Maybe the collection of objects can be a class.
Set.
For example.
The category of sets or groups are very small.
As in general, we define a class of objects and so a subclass, in this case a subcategory. We can define a subcategory of C is another category G, such that every object of G is an object of C, as usual. Each homomorphism of G is a homomorphism of C for every objects AB. And the composition of the identity are the same of C. Okay? Well, as we have the set theory as an emblematic intuition, so let's see something that set theory as it happens in the category.
Don't understand the difference between locally small and small.
Let's see. In small, the two classes, objects and morphisms, are sets. Locally small, only the homomorphism is sets. Maybe the objects can be a class.
But then you say for every AB in C.
Yes.
Yes.
Think about sets. You have a class of sets. Then C0 is a class. But given two concrete sets, you have a set of. And
But
it's
then
locally small, but not small.
But then if you then say that that's the case for every AB, for every couple of objects in the, then it's the case for all objects, isn't it?
Yes, but think about it. You have a class of sets, okay? You agree with me? Then Z0 is a class. But take two sets, A and B, then compute the class, the family of functions between them. It's a class because it's contained in the Cartesian product. Then it's a set. Then it's locally for every pair of sets, the family of functions with them is a set. Okay?
No, but
A little strange.
criterion.
It's okay. Let's see. The empty set can be characterized in set theory this way. For every set A, there is a unique function from the empty set to A. This function is the empty set theory. So let's put this condition in the theory of categories now. So an object 0 in a category C is an initial object. If for every object A of C, there is a unique morphism from 0 to A. The condition of set theory was put in the category now. This initial object, case it exists, is unique. So isomorphism, maybe there is two, but they are isomorph between them. And we can talk about a terminal object too, like in, let's see, with 0 and 1, then the motivation. So, and object 1 in a category is terminal. If for every object C, there is a unique morphism from A to 1. As in the case of the initial object, the terminal object, in case it exists, is unique. In set theory, when we are working with the functions, we always give a good moment to injective functions, surjective functions, bijective functions. So we must put these conditions in the category 2. And it's interesting, maybe visual in some cases. Let's see. Well, a function is injective if and only if in set theory. For every pair of functions, G and H, if we have this equality between the composition, then we have that G coincides with H. So, for simple, J is equal H. Now, in the category, a definition. A morphism in a category is a monomorphism, or sometimes it's set a aromonic or a morphism monic. If for every pair of morphism G and H from X to A, such that the composition is equal, implies this equality. But looking figure in diagram, we have two morphisms, J and H, parallel, another morphism from A to B, and we are axes that they commute. So this implies that J is equal H. Well, and for surjective functions, we have the endomorphisms. And a morphism is an epimorphism or is a morphism epic if for every pair of functions, now from B to X, it's a right of B. If the composition is equal, and so the two functions coincide. In this case, in diagram, we have this situation. AB of the function, the two other morphisms at the right of B, here left. We exist that the diagram commutes. In this case, the two morphisms are equal. when we think to superreactive and injective functions, they are not so much dual for us. Maybe are two separate concepts. But in category, in some sense, it's okay. There is a type of dualism between the two concepts.
In fact, they have dual notion. Right?
Yeah.
In the way we learn about functions, we never learn that to be surjective is dual property to be injective. And in fact, it is. This is one of the important things about studying category theory. You abstract the notions and you learn more about usual mathematical concepts. Indeed, the notion of surjective and injective are the same, are two directions of the arrows or the functions. Okay? Then it's very important function. One of the interesting things that category theory does is to abstract the properties and put in terms just of arrows and objects without using elements. Then it's very tricky, a tricky way to introduce an injective function and a surjective function without using elements.
And isomorphism function.
And we deduce, we infer, we discover that in fact they are dual concepts. Very nice.
And isomorphism at canonic. See. Now another concept of theory category, the Cartesian product. We have a version to category to Cartesian product. If AB is a pair of objects in a category C, the Cartesian product of this pair, case it exists, is a pair A Cartesian B. We are talking this way, but in category we don't know what is Cartesian. No? And as we want here one morphism, we put a set with two morphisms, P1 and P2, such that the Cartesian product is an object. P1 is the projection, the function projection. Put for each pair x, y into A, only x. And P2, the other projection, only y. A morphism in C, such it's not enough. We need something else. If another pair C with two functions is a pair in the same conditions, in this case, we need this diagram commutes. We have A Cartesian B, the projection P1 and A, the projection P2 and B. If case there is another object C with the functions if1 in A, if2 in B, so in this case there is exactly one function from C to A Cartesian B, and all these diagram commutes. Morphism. Yes, morphism. It's okay. The product is unique. Of course, A Cartesian B isomorphic to B, just invert the positions. The canonical projections are epimorphisms. And the next concept, the coproduct, is a dual concept of product. Let's see. Finite coproduct. It's similar. We just revert some directions now. I will put all the. We have two objects, a pair. It's not beautiful, this symbol here, but a P in inverse. A collection of two objects, the inclusions. So we have an inclusion from A to A coproduct B. and another inclusion from B to a product A, B. And if you have another pair doing the same thing, so there exists exactly one morphism from the coproduct in the object C. And all this diagram must commute the dual concept.
Quick question. In the picture, is there a difference between the black arrows and the dotted arrows, or?
Yes, in this case, the point arrow, in general, in category theory, signify there is exactly one. It's a convention of us. Well,
In the case of sets, what is a coproduct?
yeah,
What is?
They're just joint union.
yes, yes. Maybe the symbol of the plus circle is a pure example, symbol for the.
Yeah, it's important to stress this point. The construction is intended to generalize the notion of disjoint union. And once again, disjoint union is a dual construction of Cartesian product, something that maybe at first sight is not so obvious in theory. Then category theory explained to us that it's the same construction, just reverting the sense of the arrows.
But it's interesting that it seems that structurally, the disjoint union is more fundamental than the plain union of sets,
Exactly.
which is not structural in any sense.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's is everything about categories today. Just a first step, just an introduction. Maybe someone you'd like to study a little more. So, where are the students of Hugo Maiano? Well, you?
There should be more.
They are very experts in category theory. If you have any doubt,
Probably he knows about category much more than me.
I mean, oh, you can ask them.
So, the category of translations. The composition of translations as function is a translations. The identity function between abstract logic is a translation. The composition is associative, and the identity function is a neutral element for this. So we have a category, the category of translations. If we study a lot of categories, maybe we can use some properties and aspects of the category in the translations too. And you could develop some things and show that the category share many important properties of category. This category is complete and co-complete, so he has zero element, last element, product, coproduct, equalizer, co-equalizer, and other concepts of category conditions.
Hercules, excuse me,
Yes,
it's not the category of translations, the category of logics
logic is,
is
yes,
translation.
abstract logic, and yes.
Yes, because the objects are
Yeah.
logics.
That's actually objectionable because there are some that say that morphisms are much more important than objects.
Oh, yes.
You should refer to the category as the category of translations.
Okay, but I'm trying to let it clear to the
Yeah.
students. You have a set of objects, the objects are the logics, and the
Yes.
morphisms are translations
Exactly.
between
Yes,
them.
you're right. The topic of Italy is important because, as we have presented, a category must have objects and morphisms. We don't put only morphism or only objects. They are different.
And it's possible to do, as he said.
Yes,
You can start from
but they are
just
different categories.
Logics with translation.
It's equivalent notion because you put just the arrows and you put two properties. Having an arrow has a domain and a codomain. Just with this.
So Itala said that for this category, we have as objects the abstract logics and morphisms, the translations between abstract logics. If you just take the concept of as translations or continuous functions, and you put in the as objects the topological space, is another category. It's a little different. Well, another particularization of translations now, the conservative translations. When I start studying translations with Ítala, I must try develop something, and as a doctor Ed, must have innovations different. And so we have proposed the concept of the conservative translations. That is a function that preserve and conserve. Of course, we know that some of the historical functions are conservative translations. We know of that. But we try to develop this theory about conservative translation. So, some papers where we have produced about this subject. One in analysis of full applied logic, the 2001, and my thesis. For logical systems, just we consider to preserve deduction. In another paper where we developed something about that. Oops, it's not working. The general notion of translations introduced in the original paper of translations that I have talked, certain maps that seem to be intuitive examples of translation, such as identity map from intuitionistic logic into classical logic, or the forgetful map that forgets the modal operators from modal logic into classical logic. Such cases would be ruled out, put off, if the strict notion of conservative translations was used, or the notions of Bajitics and Epstein. Let's see in particular. The identity function from intuitionistic logic to classical logic, each formula is the same, with the connective, negation, one of the usual language for intuitionistic logic. This function is a translation from intuitionistic logic into classical logic, but it's not a conservative translation. P or not P is a theorem of classical logic, but it's not a theorem of intuitionistic logic. So, with the inclusion or the identity function, we are not having a conservative translation.
If
Yes?
intuitionistic logic is not exactly classical logic, why does the identity function I is an identity?
The function is between language. So, we are applying formula to formula.
But he asks about the name.
Yeah?
He asks about the name. Identity, in category theory, identity with the same object.
It's an abuse of language. It's in the sense that it's the function that does nothing, because you take the formula to the same formula, but strictly it's not the identity function because it is between different objects.
Exactly.
But it's something a set theoretic abuse of language.
It's not identity arrow, let's say.
It would be something like inclusion.
Inclusion would be determined by.
So, maybe a little more specific and maybe interesting case of translation is the schematic functions. Because these schematic functions preserve schemas. So, they are constructive. It's easy to see exactly what's defined by the function.
So can we go back to the definition of conservative translation?
One moment. Oh. Other?
One more, yeah. I want to see the definition. No, one more. Oh, thank you.
One this? Okay.
Hercules,
Huh?
put in the blackboard the function from intuitionistic logic and classical logic and show the problem.
Just the name, the identity, because the identity between the language and the formulas apply.
This category
Yes.
was
Yeah,
very
yes.
strange.
It's a little different. So, the schematic functions or schematic translations that interest to us, we apply each element of a language in a schema in another language. So, we have a schema to propositional atomic formulas. Maybe are not just propositional logic. Maybe we are translating first or second order logics too. For each unary connective schema and for each binary connective schema, and we put here just a language with only unary and binary connectives. If you have 3, 4 connective ternary and for one, so we can extend the definition. A schematic mapping is a homomorphism between languages. And when we get such translation, it's a little more interesting. It's easier to translate properties from one logic to another logic. But we have developed a general theory and looking, thinking about any case. And more specific, a schematic mapping is literal. If it translates each connective, each health, or the conjunction in conjunction, the negation in negation, maybe it's possible to do that. And a translation between schematic if the function, the mapping is schematic. Some results. So we have a subcategory. The composition of conservative translation is conservative translation. In abstract logic, the composition is associative, of course. The identity function is a conservative translation. And we have so a subcategory that we have denoted the TR-CON, conservative translation, whose objects are abstract logic, of course. In some moment tomorrow, I will present the same function, conservative function, but the objects are non-monotonic logic, are cumulative logics in another case. So it's a little different because we have changed the objects of the category.
There is a question here.
Yeah, but objects of this category are logic with different signatures, so they can have different connectives and stuff. Or is it like all the logics of one signature?
No, not all together. You can have different.
So this category of the conservative translation is naturally a subcategory. It's co-complete, have the co-product, but it's not complete. This category has no the product, Cartesian product, finite product. Another condition, if we have a conservative translation using just the image verse and inclusion of sets, we have this condition.
This is a theorem we have obtained and proved.
Yes. For some schematic functions, if we have a literal translation for the negation, I'm sorry. It's okay?
Assim que ela serve, you need to prove.
If we have a literal translation relative to negation, and if the L2 is negation consistent, the definition in L2 we don't demonstrate alpha and negation alpha. So L1 is L constant 2, L1 is constant 2. If we have a recursive and conservative schematic is recursive, of course, function from a decidable logic L2, so we can pass the stability of L2 for L1. Sometimes when we construct a new logic, one thing that we have put is decidable this logic. If you have a function, and sometimes some of these logic that we have proposed are very similar, or at least near for another one, we can use the translation for decidable decisions.
So can we think of conservative translations as preserving not only theorem put, but also non-theorem put, like not only validity, but also invalidity, let's say?
Under certain conditions.
No, that's the definition of conservative.
Yes.
From John Marcus' perspective, you would say that it preserves anti-theorem rules.
From our perspective, what?
Yes.
And,
If gamma inverse alpha, then T of gamma inverse alpha.
sorry?
If gamma inverse alpha, then T of gamma inverse T of alpha. And if gamma does not derive alpha, then T of gamma does not derive T of gamma.
Yes, yes, the converse, yes.
Preserve the inference and the
Because of the equivalence.
But if the translation is conservative, this is if and only if.
exactly, but you put
And
it that
here, Hercules is presenting some of the many results we have obtained. This shows that by this studying translations between logics, we have some general results that allow us to know results concerning one of the logics, depending on results we know about the other logics by the study of translations. And so this is very interesting in this category of logics with morphisms, which are translations.
The point is the interrelations between logical systems, maybe the same logic in some cases. What we can do, it depends on the function, it depends on serious notions and aspects. So, as a consequence, there is no recursive conservative translation for first order logic into classical propositional logic, because classical logic is decided.
In the second result, why do you need the assumption that the translation is conservative?
It's recursive.
No, why do you need that the translation is conservative?
Because you have a property in the second system, you by the conservative you put in the first one. The function mapping an element from one object to another object. So we use the function and applying the second object or the second structure, what can have. So the conservative put again in the system, the first system again.
Conservative translations are more restricted cases of translations. Our first definition, general one, that was not usual in the literature, it's good because it incorporates certain cases. For instance, we can have a translation from intuitionistic logic into classical logic. But when we obtain conservative translations, we may understand certain properties of the involved logics by analyzing properties of one of them. And so the study of conservative translations is very interesting, and the definition is good because we can understand a little more relations between logics. But we also can understand certain kinds of relations when we are only dealing with general translations. But with conservative translations, the category helps us much more, the subcategory. And so why to study conservative translations? Because under this point of view, we can understand a little more the involved logics and the interrelations between them. But following, he will show that they are not so good. And then we try to introduce another definition, another strict definition, that at the beginning we thought that it was excellent, but we saw that it has more or less the same problems. And then we have introduced another more general definition. He will show, and he will show he will project a figure that will show you the interrelation between these kinds of definitions. Okay, that's all.
This is okay.
I don't have to think it.
Maybe we can talk. But if I understand your question, is in the conservative functions, go and back. So we can return for the first logic, some property, some case, some.
I was just checking my notes from yesterday. So a standard translation for between logic 1 and logic 2 is one such that if alpha is a theorem in one, it's also a theorem in the other and vice versa, right?
Yes. Yes. The translations just apply theorems and in our case deductions.
Yes.
In conservative, translate
in a conservative one, if delta entails alpha in one,
preserve
and
and
the
conserve.
translation of delta translates the translation of alpha in the other one. Do you mind hopefully writing them down so I can see that? Maybe it would be helpful. No? Just to be sure that I know what we're talking about. No, never mind. Sorry.
We talk again. That's it. Not working fine anymore. In some cases, if we have a set of axioms, we can translate it for another. If you have a surjective function, another set of axioms for the second logic. And one thing that happened in our studies is that, I'm sorry. Conservative translations preserve non-triviality. If you have in the first logic a set non-trivial, the image of this set in the second logic is non-trivial too. But if it's trivial, we don't know what happened. So we present another definition of a translation, a little more specific, try to resolve or to put another condition to influence this question. Well, Mundici, as the name,
Yerjavec.
Yerja.
There is some Czech people here, may correct me.
How do you pronounce?
Yerjavec. It's
Yarek.
a part of an array.
Chava.
From Czech Republic. So,
He's a very good mathematician.
Yes.
yeah. So looking for our works, it's the interesting part for us. He pointed that there are so many conservative translations. More than that, he proved this. If finitary logic, consequence here, whose domain is denumerable, so there is a conservative translation from this logic into classical propositional logic. More than, the result is valid not only in classical logic, but a big class of logic. So, in some sense, it's somewhat conservative translation. We agree with the result of the research. We knew the paper, it is fine, and yes, but there is a lot of continuous function between topological spaces. There is a lot of so and you know that maybe it's not like that anyone is interesting. Sometimes it's interesting some particular function that show us what we can do with that function. It's not anyone.
The paper is very beautiful, and he uses algebraic structures in order to show these results. And he has shown, for instance, that there is no conservative translation from asynchronous logic, LP, the logic of paradox, into classical logic. For instance, he has shown this. And then we think that there is no problem that with the ubiquity of conservative translations. We have many conservative translations between the big class of logics.
I would like to make a comment about this. The fact that there is a conservative translation, maybe that does not mean that there is an interesting conservative
Yes.
or informative conservative. It's not informative. This kind of result, I read carefully the book, and instead the way in which that conservative translation constructed, it kind of observe that it is required to be denumerable. Okay, it's a kind of the argument is kind of about cardinality, let's say. Then you need some structure in the classical logic that LP, for instance, does have, in which you can reverse this kind of translation of the theorems. It's a tricky way to translate derivability in the source logic into derivability in classical logic, another way around. But that is a very artificial translation. It's a set theoretic translation, let's say. It has nothing, it doesn't say nothing about the internal derivability inside the logic. Much more interesting translation would be, for instance, translate rules into rules. That is an informative. This is a kind of curiosity, mathematical curiosity, but it does not mean that the concept of conservative translation is trivial, because we have interesting conservative translation. The challenge is to find interesting conservative translation, because as we know that it's possible always to translate all. In several conditions, it's possible to translate.
We have proved with another student that we have studied some relations involving non-monotonic logics. And we have obtained results that show that to a certain, there are no conservative translations between certain certain conservative translation between non-monotonic logics and Tarskian logics. And so there are results.
If you agree, the next.
So, are the functions that he considered here in general recursive?
To be?
So he is proving a general result about translation function, right? I'm just curious, are they in general recursive?
We don't know.
It seems that
Maybe
not.
it's constructive, but it's so much different. So sometimes we have some function, constructive function, but it's so big, the constructive, that we can't say exactly what's the function. We have that there is someone, but who is this someone?
His result is an existence result.
Okay.
There is translation, but he has not shown. And has not, he has not any result concerning the recursiveness of this.
What do you mean by finitary logic there? That you have a finite set of values? By finitary logic, what do you mean there?
The finitary logic is deduction is finite, finite deduction. The set enumerable is more literal. More one? Someone? No? It's okay? I know. So, there is a richness of conservatism, and it's okay. We see, fine. But there is abundance of translations or continuous functions, and this is not a problem for us. Of course, we recognize that we don't resolve any problem with the conservative translation. We are just put a step again to study. Maybe in the emphasis in mathematics, sometimes in emphasis in logical, and sometimes using some particular cases to resolve logical problems too. So in the next pass, we are looking for other concepts or other notions of translations. So just to synthesize some things, translations like Pravitz and Malmet, it's not exactly the same our definition. Our definition is more general, just to preserve deductibility and not conserve. Translations, in the sense of Voitinsk, is particular case of our conservative translation, because Voitinsk use schematic functions, and for very particular cases of logic too. Epstein is a case of our conservative translations too, because for Epstein it's interesting the model. Translations, logic must work with strong model of propositional logics. Homologically, when Gates's interpretations or functions are conservative translations from classical logic into intuitionistic logic. And the interpretations of Gödel used this interpretation, are not translations in our synthesis, because the function of Gödel does not preserve deduction. So, a paper where we develop a little more exhaustive the interpretation of Gödel. One thing, when we tried to obtain some translations, we needed, in general, to look for the models of logics. In general, when we present a logic, we just have a collection of formulas and axioms or rules or and we don't know what happened in general. So we need to look in general for the models. And one thing that we could observe, particularly with algebraic models, it was interesting for us to try interrelations between logics, whose logics have algebraic model, because we could compare the algebraic model. So we observed these results. Someone has a question?
I will draw it, thank you.
Well, in this case, we have a relation of consequence. Two elements are not exactly equal, but they have the same consequence. So we have the quotient mapping, and the quotient mapping is a translation, and is a conservative translation too. It's interesting because in general for algebraic models, we use this strategy to get the algebra in the Lindenbaum task, and these results say for us that we can, in fact, to look for the Lindenbaum algebra, because we have a conservative translation, everything that, in the case of translation, not everything, that we have in the Lindenbaum algebra, we can pass for the logic original. So, we need that this diagram commute here in the logics, here the two quotient functions, here the quotient logics, and one thing that is interesting for us, when it happens, this function between the quotient logics must be injective. So one way to consider that a translation is not a conservative translation. We try to look for this function here. If it's not injective, so we know that it is not a conservative translation. Sometimes we will have
I mean, an observation too. We have obtained several translations between several logics, and we have produced also some papers. But this result was one of the most important we have obtained. We looked for a general result that could guarantee the existence of conservative translations between two special logics. And we saw that in order to obtain a conservative translation between two logics, we would have to know that there is a conservative translation between the quotient structures associated to such logics. And here I have an observation or definition of logic is not only concerned to languages and consequence relation. It's concerned to sets endowed with consequence relation. And so we can speak about conservative translations between quotient structures. They are not languages. They are structures, algebraic structures. And so we see that our general definition continues good. And this is very important, this result, because we have obtained and improved the existence of translations between logics by proving the existence of translations between their quotient structures.
This is a kind of informative translation that we say.
Yes,
This
it's
is informative.
very informative, as Marcelo says.
It's okay. So the non-monotonic logics.
Yeah, sorry, just a question relating to the previous result. So is that like a good direction to show that there are not too many logics? Because that would be interesting, right, to know that, for example, the category of consolidated translation is not too big. But are there any results on this direction? I'm wondering.
Eu sei, seria um indicativo, categoria, mais grande. Oh,
Because you've shown that there are lots of translations, right? That can be considered. But like, are there not too big in the sense that is it a small category or not? I'm wondering.
In some sense, is contrary the result of the their research. It's not so big collection of morphisms between is it?
I'm wondering if this is a good direction to show that maybe it will not be too big. Only look at the portions. But probably
entender a auditoria, caracterizar as coisas em termos da possível.
Okay.
It doesn't say anything about. It's not really telling you that. How many translations, how many using that. I mean, you have to have.
Okay, people. Anyway, there is a open font of problems to look for. So maybe it's a point interesting. Okay. So we have used some notion to construct the conservative translation in a lot of logic, and in general, these functions are schematic, very simple to understand each step. Well, so someday asked if you put non-monotonic logic and if you put other types of logic, and Mauro Scher did at least one study in this direction. So, as students of Ítala, Ítala is completely in love with the translations for a long time. Me too. And in these papers with the Scher, it was obtained some results. There is no conservative translation from cumulative non-monotonic logic into Tarskian logic. It was a problem that Epstein put in, when he wrote something about translation. Is there a translation for any two logics? As language in a very liberal sense, we always can translate something in something. But it was a problem. Maybe there is some logic that we can't translate one and another. When? Why? Well, what happened in this case? So here we have some examples in this case. There is no surjective conservative translation from a Tarskian logic into a monotonic, because the idea of one is monotonic and another one is non-monotonic. There is some difference. So there is no conservative translation from classical logic into LP, that is a non-monotonic logic studied by Scher. And now we are in the last, the third moment. I have 5 or 10 minutes, 10 minutes. I will be happy, be fast. The concept of the translation between logics allows us to generate Galois junctions between Tarskian spaces in some very particular case. Let's see. So first the definition. If you have two orders, A and B, just to separate the concepts, and A is belong to A, P to P, and we have a pair of functions in contrary directions. If from A to P and G to P from P to A. So we name the pair of functions a Galois connections if and only if we have these conditions with the order. These Galois connections abstract the idea of from the Galois theory when we have here in the extensions of fields, and here in P we have the soluble groups. And to resolve the problem, if we can resolve with like similar to Bhaskara method to resolve the equation of second any grade. And it was proved using the Galois theory that we don't have a general algorithm to resolve equations from grade 5 or plus. And the idea is just to put a problem inside the extensions of fields, a function that applies this problem in solvable groups, resolve there, and put again in the fields the problem. So this Galois connection is an abstraction of the results from Galois. Dual Galois connection, we just invert the elements A, GP, and this case. And we have named the adjunction a function, a pair of functions this way. This is more usual to happen in topics in mathematics. But Galois connections too, there are some cases. We are studying some topic, oh, this is a Galois pair, this is a adjunction, this is a connection. And the same case, the dual of adjunction, just inverting the order too. So we have at least here 4 pairs. But there are some papers that put a little more combinations of these elements. This name adjunction comes from theory of categories, and sometimes it's named residuals. I believe in this paper, algebraic maths from done in high degree, it's used to residuate the name. If someone is interested to see a little of the theory of connection of Galois pairs, this is a good possibility. And this article is interesting too about the Galois pairs. But a result very interesting is that if you have two orders, functions like presented, now I and B belong to A and P and Q belong to P, we have an adjunction. If you have a collection of informations, first, A is less or equal J composed with F. More than we can prove that this composition function is a closure operator. And this composition F with G is equal P. We can prove also that this composition is an interior operation. And the two functions, if and G, preserve orders. If you have A less or equal B, so it's preserved, These 4 conditions are similar, are equivalent to an adjunction. and another way to define adjunct, and combination of this can do for all the definitions there. Well,
And please, we have at most 5 minutes.
oh,
please.
1 or 2 minutes or more, 1 or 2 slides. So some properties of adjunctions. Says that the compositions are respectively Tarski operator interior. Some reasons. So let's see. The last slide. If you have two logics, L1, L2, and a translation, just translation in our sense, and you consider the closed sets or theory of L1 defined or denoted by if L1, and the same case for the second logic. Now, we will define two functions. This way, f from closed sets of L1 in closed sets of L2, defined this way. The direct image of is not a closed set. We don't know that. So we apply for the set G, TDD, and to get a closed set, the consequence two of these elements. But in the other direction, if you have an E as a closed element here, the inverse image, as we have seen yesterday, the inverse image of a closed set is a closed set. So this element is a closed set of if you want. So naturally, we can show that this pair FG is an adjunction from these two structures defined with the translation. It's not exactly the translation. So Galois pairs are used to take one problem for one contact field to another, and a little more adequate to resolve the problem, and vice versa. And our translations between logics are used in similar ways. We sometimes have a problem or question from a logic, investigate from a function in another logic, and if possible to go back with the result to this conservative translation, it's fine. And sometimes we can do that. So in the next step, you lapidate the concept a little more. Thank you.